2023, in my opinion, was a great year in movies, so with the end of the year, here are my top 10 movies of 2023. Now, before we get into it, I will say that I haven't seen all the new releases this year because that would just be downright impossible, but I have seen about 51 of them. So if there's a good movie that doesn't make the list, it's probably because I haven't seen it yet. But at the end of the day, this is my list, this is just my opinion, and these are the movies that I enjoyed the most this year. So let's get into it. Jumping right into it, at number 10, I have Creed 3, and this is Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, and in my opinion, he killed it. I loved what he did with the character of Adonis Creed, and him and Jonathan Majors were great on screen together. Now, the boxing scenes were probably some of the best I've seen in the whole Rocky universe, and you could really see where he just let anime inspire pretty much all of those scenes, and I loved every part of it. Coming in at number 9 is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. Now, Tom Cruise is just the man, and unlike Fast and Furious, these movies just somehow keep getting better as they go on. The action was obviously phenomenal, and the fact that Tom Cruise at his age is still doing most of these stunts is just insane. And I loved how the villain always seemed like it was one step ahead because it really kept you on edge throughout this entire movie. But I will say I did hate that this movie was just a part 1 to a part 2, but it was still a great movie. At number 8 is The Iron Claw, and this is one of the most heartbreaking movies not only of the year, but that I've seen in my entire life, but it is just so good. It was packed from top to bottom with great performances, but Zac Efron was clearly the standout. This was his movie, and I hope he gets some type of recognition from the Academy for his performance in this movie because it was just phenomenal. His performance truly just pulls you into this movie and you feel the weight of everything that he goes to. And in my opinion, his character gets the most perfect ending while also delivering one of the saddest lines I've ever heard in a movie. But as tragic as this movie was, the wrestling scenes were a lot of fun to watch, being a wrestling fan, and that just makes this movie a must-watch in my opinion. At number 7, I have Godzilla Minus One. Now, this was the surprise movie of the year for me, and I can't believe I'm about to say this about a Godzilla movie, but I actually cared about the human characters in this movie. The story was about how one deals with grief, survivor's guilt, and PTSD, and it was just handled so well. And not only that, but Godzilla looked and was amazing in this film. He was just a straight up menace throughout this entire movie, but again, the human characters is what made this film so good because at times, I forgot I was watching a Godzilla movie. At number 6 is John Wick Chapter 4, and this is hands down just one of the best action movies I've ever seen. The story and the characters were great as I really found myself caring about a lot of the side characters in this movie. But the best part of this film is no question the action. It's some of the best action I have ever seen, not only in a John Wick film, but just in an action movie in general. They did a lot of things in terms of the action in this movie, but that top-down shot of John Wick taking out guys with inflammatory rounds was one of the coolest scenes that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Yes, John Wick has tons of plot armor in this movie, but it is just such a fun watch. At number 5, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and this was the perfect way to end one of the best trilogies in the MCU. It had tons of emotion, and this truly was Rocket's movie. His backstory was so tragic, but it only made this movie better. The High Evolutionary was great, and in my opinion, he's one of the better villains in the MCU because he was just so easy to hate in this movie. It also had some great humor in this movie as well, but I think the action is some of the best that we've gotten from an MCU movie, and I'm mostly saying that because of that one-shot hallway fight scene where they're fighting to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. That scene was just awesome and was probably my favorite part of the movie, but all in all, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is easily a top 10 MCU movie in my opinion. At number 4, I have Past Lives, and this is usually not a movie I'm really into, but what made this movie just so good is just how simple it was. It had great performances by its two main leads, and it really left you wondering what could have been in the end, which kind of made this movie a little bit sad. There are also quite a few scenes in this movie that had limited dialogue, but that scene still said so much in the process. This movie packs a lot of emotion and is just a great watch. At number 3, I have Killers of the Flower Moon, and I don't think there was a single second of this movie where I wasn't engaged. It's a long movie, but it earns every second of its runtime. De Niro and DiCaprio were great as expected, but Lily Gladstone deserves an Oscar for her performance in this movie. She was easily the standout performance in my opinion, and she just killed every scene that she was in. I mean, you really felt the emotion of what her character was going through. This film was also visually stunning and told a great story, and I think come Oscar season, the Academy is gonna love this movie. At number 2, I have Across the Spider-Verse, and this is probably the best animated movie I have ever seen. The animation was just breathtaking in every single scene, and the story was just wow. And on top of that, they had a great story not only for Miles, but for Gwen as well. And in my opinion, this is secretly a Gwen Stacy movie because she starts and ends the film. And she is also really the only character that gets a full character arc in this movie because everyone else's arc will be finished in the part 2 of this movie. And as a fan, I just love seeing all the Spider-Man, especially Hobie, aka Spider-Punk, who was a fan favorite in this film, and the plethora of Easter eggs and cameos in this movie because there were tons of them I really enjoyed too. And I just can't wait until Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out whenever it comes out. Now, before we get to number 1, here are some honorable mentions that came pretty close to making this list. And first up, if you can't tell by my hoodie already, is Barbie. And this is probably the most fun I had watching a movie all year. Margot Robbie was great, but Ryan Gosling absolutely stole the show in my opinion. He was hilarious in just about every scene he was in. I love pretty much everything about this movie, and it was super hard to leave it off the top 10 list. Up next, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, and honestly, this movie kind of surprised me. The animation was great. It was clearly inspired by all the Spider-Verse movies, and then finally, the Turtles were actual teenagers in this movie. I love how they were played by actual kids in this film. And then we had Ice Cube as Superfly, who surprisingly did really well as the villain, and he is one of my highlights of this movie. Next is the biopic Air, starring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and honestly, I don't really have many bad things to say about this movie. It was just a really solid film, and in my opinion, it's kind of an underrated movie. I don't see very many people talking much about this movie, but this was just a really good movie, and I recommend it to really anyone who is looking for a good biopic. Up next is the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and this is probably a top 3 animated film of the year for me. It was a really fun movie, and surprisingly, Chris Pratt did really well as Mario. I was curious about that going in, but I soon forgot that he was playing Mario about 10 minutes in the movie, so good job to Chris Pratt. And also, just being a Super Mario fan, I feel like everyone has played one of those games at some point in their life, especially if they're my age. It was cool seeing all the little Easter eggs and things like that, especially that Rainbow Road scene. And yeah, the animation was really good, and it just felt like they took the characters out of the video game and put them on the big screen, and they got, well, a really good result. And finally, for the honorable mentions, I have Elemental, and in my opinion, this is the most underrated movie of the year. I thought it told a really fun, heartwarming story about what it's like to be an immigrant family, and also the animation was a little different for Pixar, but it worked, and I thought it was really creative, and I hope more people watch this movie in the future because it is a really good movie in my opinion. And now for my number 1 movie of 2023, it is Oppenheimer, and I have nothing but good things to say about this movie. Cillian Murphy was of course phenomenal as Oppenheimer, but Robert Downey Jr. low-key stole the show. This movie also just looks beautiful. I mean, the cinematography was just phenomenal, and you pair that with the sound design / score of the movie, and it just makes it even better. There were so many scenes in this movie that just make you say wow, and in my opinion, this is Christopher Nolan at his very best, and that is why it is my number 1 movie of 2023. Those are my top 10 movies of 2023. Let me know what your top 10 movies are down in the comments. I'm super excited to see what 2024 has to offer in terms of movies, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. Happy New Year, God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.